10 years ago, I wrote a book entitled The Criminalization of Christianity. And now we're living it. That's where we are. Predicted about where it would go, but I don't even know that I thought it was going to go as badly as it has. Let's take a look at actually I can click this myself. Let's take a look at the slide. I made a prediction. This was an odd thing that I actually predicted in a commentary. I do radio commentaries on the American Family Radio and the Bot Radio Network. And I actually made a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, the absurd, ridiculous kind of thing. And I actually said, hey, I think that if there was somebody who changed the appearance of their skin or had surgery to correct the features of their skin to be more like their desired race, that I'm pretty sure they'd never get a scholarship from the NAACP. That's what I said. Less than 2 weeks later, this chick shows up. Rachel Dolezal. This lady comes on the Today Show, and she's playing a great big game of pretend. There she is as a young girl, blonde, but she really relates to being African American. So she told everybody that's what she was, and she identifies. She's a transracial. That's right. She's a transracial, and she was fired from the NAACP as a result for her game of pretend. And so I was just trying to make the analogy, and lo and behold, the absurd is no longer, it's actually where we live. And so you can see the analogy. You've got, of course, a pretend black and a pretend woman, where every day is Halloween. Isn't that nice? That's where we live. Trick or treat. Wow. Did not see it coming. But maybe some of you feel like I have in the past, where you just feel, man, oh man, it's bad. It's really bad. And another email comes in, it tells you how worse it is. And darkness covers the earth. You feel it? Anybody feel that? You feel overwhelmed by the darkness, the oppressiveness of how bad it's getting? Well, you've got the Iranian nuke deal. What did Governor Huckabee say about this? He was speaking of our president and our Secretary of State. He says he's so, actually, I'm not sure which one he was speaking of, and I think it's interchangeable. He is so naive, he would trust the Iranians, and he would take the Israelis and basically march them to the door of the oven. That's what we have done. God, forgive us. And we still have a chance to stop it in Congress, and that's one of the things we must do. All right, so then, well, we've killed nearly 60 million children, and we're now chopping them up and selling their organs for profit at Planned Parenthood. Supreme Court rules to redefine marriage, and in spite of everything we tried to do, and then, oh yeah, more darkness. Oh, now, as a result, children are going to be taught this perversion as equal to marriage, and God said it's better to have a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. God help us. And of course, Christianity is criminalized as a result. If you don't believe me, watch this film and hear from the bakers and the florists and the photographers and all those, and the sportscasters and anyone who happens to run for office. Or if you happen to be a pastor in the city of Houston, your sermons are subpoenaed as the government is knocking on your door and demanding government review of your sermons. Did you ever think that we would be here in your lifetime? Neither did I. I knew some of what was coming, but I didn't know it was this bad. But God told us, so shouldn't be surprised. Isaiah 60:1-3 says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold," here's where we are, "behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people. But the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising." That's where we are. And so if you are in a place where you've got a billion parts of darkness, I was going to get real dramatic, and I want to thank Mike and Matt for all of their help with all of the technology. I was going to have, and as each one of these things, I was going to have another light go off and another light go off, and we didn't do that. But here's the gist. It doesn't matter how dark it is and how many parts of darkness there may be, that if you go up against a billion parts of darkness with just one light, guess what happens? Darkness flees. It's not a contest. It's not an issue of who's going to pull this thing. This is the laws of physics. This is how God set it up to be. And this is a clicker. Why? Because in the battle between darkness and light, light wins. That's the point. And so what God bless you. I'm glad I gave you all those 10s. That is so awesome. And so 2012, I got on my knees and I said, God, we're getting our clocks cleaned. Give me a way to fight back in an effective way on marriage. And I got invited a couple of months later to a film academy, a Christian film academy in San Antonio. And I met Curtis Bowers, as you were talking about, and he actually put me in his movie agenda. And I figured, well, if I can be in a movie, maybe I can make a movie. I come home and my husband says, wait, do you have any filmmaking experience? No. Do you have a budget? Mm-mm. Do you have a camera? No. But I have the God of the impossible. Here's my question to you today. What do you believe and what are you going to do about it? Do you believe that God is who he claims to be? Then I'm going to tell you, if you believe that God is the God of the impossible, then you better be stepping out of the boat and doing some things that cannot be done. That's what faith is all about. Without faith, you can't please him. So get off the sidelines. And so that's what I did. I started making the film the next month with a friend of mine. He took some vacation days off from his wife and kids. We started filming in March of 2012, 2 years later. And 100 interviews later, we ended up with this film, which makes the case for marriage that the nation has not heard. By the way, we showed this film in a theater in Dallas 2 weeks ago. And one of the guys in the film, he's a reparative therapist. He's an ex-homosexual. And he got up as a therapist. I wasn't sure he's going to do this. Do a little Q&A. And he says, I have to ask you as a therapist, how do you feel? And this is what encouraged me. This is the most common response in the 2 showings we had. Encouraged. Didn't expect that, did you? You expect afraid, terrified, darkness is everywhere. No, next hand went up, said hopeful. Next hand said challenged. Someone else said, I feel the power of God. That's where we need to be. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's dark. It's later than you think, but God is bigger than you know. That's the message today. By the way, we're at the theater, and somebody asked the question. Here's the question they asked. You've probably heard it. Maybe you've wondered it. What would our founding fathers say if they were here today? And so David Pickup, who's in the film, he got up and he talked about how appalled they'd be and how shocked and how this is not what they fought and bled for and all the rest. And then I got up and I said, here's what I believe. I believe that if George Washington were here today, what he'd be saying, he'd be speaking to the church and say, what in the world are you thinking? We were up against the most powerful nation on earth. We had bigger odds than you. The Revolutionary War, David Barton talks about this in the film. He said, all those patriots back then? No, there weren't all those patriots back then. There was a quarter of the American population that was for the Revolutionary War. Less than 10% actually fought the battles. And he said, we stood as a minority, but we stood making an appeal to heaven. Most people don't yet know. How many people in this room know this is our nation's first flag? You got them educated here. This is a higher than normal. We got about a quarter of you that realize that. This is actually the flag that was sent as a relative of Betsy Ross. I'm happy to tell you that it wasn't the Stars and Stripes. It was this flag that George Washington commissioned to sail on our early revolutionary ships. In fact, here's our example. Thank you, Mark Gurley. In fact, this flag flew on the ship, so you can see it up on the very top. You can see the flag. Let's zoom in just a little bit, and you can see it. That's what flew over all of it. Because they were influenced by the writings of John Locke. John Locke said, he says, when you don't know what else to do, I mean, you're facing the most powerful nation on earth. Frankly, you don't have a chance. Earthly speaking, you don't have a prayer, but they did have a prayer. And they prayed. They made the appeal to heaven. They put these on the ships. And by the way, one of the ships, when they had these on there, all of our ships did, they actually conquered a British ship and took such spoils that it had the muskets and the ammunition and supplies that really fueled much of the Revolutionary War. Because when you don't know what else to do, make an appeal to heaven. That's what we did at the Supreme Court. Incidentally, that Mark Gurley, who was just here, that's him. You can see his shadow. We stood at the steps of the Supreme Court the day before the oral arguments on the Obergefell v. Hodges case, and we made an appeal to heaven. We did it with boxes that represent 400,000 restraining orders. And we started out We didn't have legislation, but we basically let each person click a button and send 535 and plus 9 to the Supreme Court saying, we are urging you to restrain the judges. This is not their domain. This is a states' rights issue. This is a freedom issue. This is a people's rights issue. And we delivered 400,000. It didn't seem to have a dent. By the way, Bill Johnson, sorry to tell you, you actually just are to the right of David Pickup there, and I'm sorry you didn't make this particular news article. But here we are. Take a look at this. We're praying in front of the Supreme Court with all of our boxes, and look at the ray of light, the beam of light. That was not photoshopped. We made an appeal to heaven, and they didn't respond like we'd hoped. All right, so we did something else. We actually realized that Supreme Court has a rule. It's called Rule 44 that says if you don't like the ruling we hand down, you can actually appeal to us within 25 days. And so we met with the Attorney General. We actually were going to meet with Hodges, who's listed as the defendant in the case. He's the Ohio Department of Health Director. Turns out, though, after the case was handed down, this is the guy defending marriage. He goes to a homosexual marriage and he reads so-called marriage, and he reads the Bible passages. I'm not sure what they blotted out to make that right, but he actually was at a homosexual so-called wedding, and this is the defendant in the case for marriage? So we went to the Attorney General, and we met with Mike DeWine, and we said, Mike, God is the God of the impossible. The state motto in Ohio, and sorry to the Michigan fans, I did not go to Ohio State, if that makes you like me anymore. Go blue? I mean, I don't know. I'm doing my best here. But we asked him. Then we had some of our friends. Where's Allison? Is Allison here? I'll make sure I get your name right, Allison. I feel like you're my sister. But she met with the Attorney General in Michigan. And they basically asked me, said, look, we have nothing to lose by appealing it. And we can show that we did everything we could to stop it. And we actually brought into it. This is an interesting thing. Sometimes when things are really, really odd, my impression is that they're God. And so the guy that I bring into the meeting with me to the Attorney General's office in Ohio just so happens this same guy, who's pretty, he was actually the lawyer to two popes, appointed by Reagan to the UN. He is a 30-year constitutional law professor, and he just happened to have been quoted and cited by Chief Justice John Roberts in the Obergefell v. Hodges case, the very case we're hoping to have him rehear. He just happens to be quoted by the Chief Justice in his dissent. That seems odd. Doesn't that seem odd? So I'm thinking, maybe God's in this. And we made our best. And I remember telling him, I said, let me tell you something. In the year 2000, this is my pitch. I'm going to tell you as just a reminder of what God is. And I told this to the Attorney General. In the year 2000, I lived in a county named Broward. Anybody remember? This is how I spent my vacation in the year 2000. Something like this. We were counting ballots. And I said, remember election night? I said, every station had declared the election for Al Gore. Every one. Even Fox. And I did something that was odd, and no, the right-wing watchers are telling I'm the one that prayed it in. Well, I think there were millions who prayed with me, but I do think God answers prayer, and I do think that he's honored when you pray ridiculous, sun-stopping prayers. And I said, God, I'm asking you to do what had never been done before. I'm asking you to take the state of Florida, where I lived at the time, from Al Gore, give it to George Bush so that unborn children will live and not die. And that was my prayer. And I was on the recount team, and I can tell you what it meant from the recount team, that two of the three judges overseeing the Palm Beach County Operations Center, two of the three of them had Al Gore bumper stickers on their car. It was impossible. And then the Florida Supreme Court was not with us, and a buddy of mine was the one that delivered the military ballots to the Florida Supreme Court. She didn't tell anybody, but she told me. She prayed over them all night long and anointed them with oil before delivering them to the Florida Supreme Court, which is the only case we won, which went to the U.S. Supreme Court, which changed the outcome of the election. So my belief was if we can change the outcome, if God can change the outcome of an election, he can change the outcome of a Supreme Court ruling. It didn't happen quite that way, and we like I said, we delivered 400,000 of these. But here's what I think. Wouldn't it be cool? And I'll just give you a little preview. We've reserved the site that will point to restrain the judges. We've reserved the site impeachthejudges.com. Wouldn't that be fun? I think. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elena Kagan, and Justice Kennedy, just for fun. Because I know it'll bug them, and I just like that idea a lot. I'm sorry, Pastor, if that's not a good idea, we can talk about that. Maybe you can counsel me after that. But when we did pink slips, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2010, we sent pink slips to Congress. And I worked with Joseph Faber. There he is on the right from WorldNet Daily. There's Congressman Steve King, who introduced the Restrain the Judges bill for us, along with Senator Ted Cruz. Behind him's Trent Franks. Michelle Bachmann stood up and said, there are actually more pink slips in my office. They are taller than I am in my office. We delivered not 400,000, not 4 million. We delivered 10 million pink slips in a matter of weeks because we all worked together when we multiplied. And you see the Washington Monument on the far left? Okay, you keep going beyond Empire State Building, Sears Tower. We actually were taller 3 times the height of the Washington Monument. It wasn't, this shows 8 million. We were at 10 million by the time it was over. In fact, then Senator Jim DeMint went on Greta Van Susteren, and the thing just went nuts. We couldn't keep up with the orders. We actually had to go out of state for pink paper, but it actually was taller than the tallest building. That's what we could do with impeachment slips. Don't you think that'd be fun? We get the pink slips for impeachment, and then add to it that we need you to pass the First Amendment Defense Act and some other things, and so that's coming soon. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Here's what I want to tell you, that this is the moment. Remembering that you remember the song. Remember the song, This Little Gospel Light of Mine? And we can edit that out of the film because, again, that's not my gifting. But what was the word? You hide it under a bushel? No, right? We're going to shine it all around the neighborhood. Anybody else sing that song? That's what it's all about, because one light dispels all of the millions of parts of darkness. And so it's time for those of you who think that, well, I really can't speak. I was the kid who was afraid to give a speech. In fact, I remember I was a keynote at a pro-life event, and the girl who was MC went through speakers training with me, and here's what she said, really complimentary. She said, Janet, I'm really surprised. I went through speakers training with you, and I'm really surprised that you ended up being our spokesperson. What do you say to that? Thank you. That's nice. God is famous. God is famous for taking people on the B list and bringing them to the forefront in the A list. Look at Gideon. He says, I'm the smallest tribe. I'm the least in my tribe. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. People say, who are those people? Most people know them by their false gods' names, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But I think if you go in a burning furnace, you ought to be named by your real name. Esther and David, his own father, overlooks him. You know the story. When it comes time, well, yeah, I guess Davy's in the field. If you need somebody else, we could get him out and see if you want to anoint him. But out of the shadows comes from the 3-year research from the Center for Medical Progress. Here's the deal. They did 3 years of research. They went undercover. And they showed that the butchers at Planned Parenthood are actually chopping up these kids and selling them for spare parts. And now there's actually a vote scheduled, and we're planning to be scheduled next week in the Senate to defund Planned Parenthood. It's time to step out of the shadows. And by the way, someone at dinner said to me, hey, make sure you know the number. This is the number I'd ask you to put on your speed dial. It's the Capitol switchboard. You need to call your senators, because right now I think we're about 3 votes short of a veto-proof majority in the Senate to defund Planned Parenthood. 202-224-3121. We want to say no tax money to the butchers at Planned Parenthood. And see me afterwards at the table. Not only will we sell you a whole box full of DVDs, but we will also give you that phone number, 202-224-3121. Here's my theory. People say it's the worst, it's the darkest, it's the bleakest. Are we in the last hours? I think very probably, very, very likely. But you know what I believe? I believe that we might just, if we follow God's checklist in 2 Chronicles 7:14, we might be able to squeeze out a little more time, a little more freedom, and maybe a third great awakening if we humble ourselves and pray and seek His face. And if we do the thing that most people forget about doing, and that's turning from our wicked ways. So evil rears its ugly head in every generation. What determines the outcome? It's what people do about it. Let's show a clip from the movie. I want you to meet a friend of mine, Phyllis Schlafly. She's going to be 91 this year, next month. And I want you to see how this woman faced the impossible, but she didn't just wring her hands and complain, oh, it must just be the end of the world. Evil's really bad. I better just quit. There's no way we can win. here's what Phyllis Schlafly did in the face of evil. Let's play it.
In order to have held the line for the last 5 years against the tremendous odds of White House lobbying, federal government expenditure, prominent people, and big money, we had to have somebody on our side who was more powerful than the President of the United States.
ERA passed Congress with only 23 out of 435 members of the House voting no, and passed the Senate with only 8 out of 100 senators voting no. Within the first 12 months, it was ratified in 30 states, and under our Constitution, they only needed 8 more. And supporting ERA were all those who had pretensions to political power, from left to right, from Ted Kennedy to George Wallace, and 3 presidents of the United States, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter. They locked ERA into their other demands: taxpayer funding of abortions and the entire gay rights agenda. We didn't have any internet. We didn't have fax machines. We only had the telephone and the Phyllis Schlafly report. We did not have one single big political name at our rally. But that rally nevertheless morphed our Stop ERA committee into the nucleus of the mighty pro-family movement that is so powerful today. I was standing in the gallery of the Illinois House when ABC Nightline put now President Eleanor Smeal in front of the cameras and said, "Miss Smeal, you said you had the votes. What happened?" And she replied, "There is something very powerful against us, and I certainly don't mean people."
Do you hear that? That's the president, the former president of the National Organization of Some Women. Can you believe that? Think about it. I was on a call with a lot of our leaders, and they're like, "Oh, things are bad, and oh, things are hand-wringing, oh, things are really, really bad." And I told them this story, that the president of the National Organization of Women, they had the votes, it was secure, it was done. She goes on Nightline, and she said, "There is something very powerful working against us, and I certainly don't mean people." We need to realize that there is something very powerful working for us because we are for him. And I certainly don't mean people. Here's what she had. No email, no Facebook, no Twitter, no internet, no Fox News, no Hannity, no Rush Limbaugh, no big names. The fax machine had not been invented yet. The woman faced a freight train and won. Ronald Reagan faced communism. When he was in Hollywood, by the way, what he did is when the communists took over, and they were picketing, and they said, "Get down on the floor as the shuttle goes by so you can get in your movie." And he was the only one who sat up, where they were throwing bottles and rocks and threatening, saying, "You'll never be in Hollywood again, you'll never act again, we're going to throw acid in your face." He stood and he said, "Evil is powerless if the good are unafraid." We don't have time for the Reagan clip, but it's in there too. Get the movie. Let's take a look. Actions are what you believe. That's it. Bottom line, everything else is just religious talk. You want to tell me how big you think God is? I want you to show me. I want to see by your life. Because if you believe God is the God of the impossible, then step out and do what can't be done. That's the message. And so my husband says to me, "Hey, Jan, we moved back to Florida. I just moved back from Florida to Ohio." And this is what he says to me. Knowing my background in the pro-life movement, I'd worked to pass the nation's first ban on partial birth abortion. And he says, "Well, you're here anyway." He says, why don't you outlaw abortion while you're here?" I mean, sure. I got a few minutes. I'm here anyway. Right? Time to kill. I laughed at him because I didn't think, I don't know how that can be done. And I went to a funeral, and God put in my heart this idea. I said, if we can't get every child just yet to rescue every child out of the burning building, let's get everyone we can. And I said, you've all seen the bumper. How many people have seen the bumper sticker, "Abortion stops a beating heart"? Have you seen it? All right. This turns it upside down to ensure that a beating heart will stop abortion. It's called the Heartbeat Bill. And in 2010, in December, we assembled a team of attorneys, including my professor, who was cited by the Chief Justice, to draft the bill to be the arrow in the heart of Roe versus Wade. Why? Because they said viability is the marker when states can get involved and protect children. We got a better marker than viability. Viability, you know what viability is? It's a guess. It's where the abortionist says, well, it's about this big, and I think, well, you got a 90% chance that you're wrong. That we think we might have a chance. Depends on what hospital you're in, what doctor you get, what year you're born. Viability is a great big chance. We got something better. Medicine shows us that if there is a detectable heartbeat in an unborn baby, then you've got a 97% likelihood that child will survive to full term. And we want to tell the court, look, we're not even asking you to overturn the whole thing. We're just asking you to take the marker from viability, which is miles away from conception, where we want to go, all the way down to heartbeat, which happens very, very soon, and actually before the woman even knows she's pregnant. But we get a detectable heartbeat about 6 weeks or so. 7 depends on So what we did is we filled up a room with hearts. Those are red heart balloons, and this is what I do. It's a little overboard. And so here we are. In fact, that gentleman, Ron Magg, in the legislature, favorite quote, he says, the only judge that I care about, what about the courts? What are the courts going to do? He says, the only judge I care about it doesn't sit on the Supreme Court. He doesn't wear a Supreme Court robe. And here, so we ordered a 3-story, I did what anybody else would do. I ordered a 3-story high heartbeat balloon. And we rented a plane to fly over, and we filled up the atrium, and we delivered all those balloons to all the members of the House. We passed it in the House, and in the Senate we had trouble. So it was a different Valentine's Day, and they said, you're not allowed to have helium balloons in the Senate. They're too austere. So we sent them roses, 2,200 roses, the amount of babies that would be saved by the heartbeat bill every month. And so that's me holding up the amount of supporters. Just to let you know what it's been like for the last 5 years. We brought in the late Dr. Wilkie, a good friend of mine. We've actually renamed the bill after the founder of the pro-life movement, Dr. Jack Wilkie. And he came in and testified. And this was kind of fun, we brought in the youngest to ever testify, a 9-week-old unborn baby. And so there she is on the ultrasound, and I know of a fact that a woman came up to me and said, my friend told me to drive her to an abortion clinic, her words, not mine, and I couldn't do it after I saw about this heartbeat. But I guess she's going to go ahead and have the abortion. Saw her 2 weeks later. She runs up and hugs me. She canceled the appointment, showed me the baby, who is now 3 years old, baby Aiden, who was influenced by this hearing of a bill that didn't even pass yet fully. And so in the Senate says, we won't let you do your little mobile ultrasound. You're not going to do your little circus act. So what we did is we actually showed the video from the House of baby Haley, who was 9 weeks old in the womb. And at just the right moment, the woman from the pregnancy center said, the House heard her heart. The Senate sees her face. And in come walking to the hearing is Senator Cliff Height holding little baby Haley, who is now 9 months old outside the womb. And the Senate still did not pass it. So we started playing hardball. And what's the difference between a rhino Republican and a pro-abortion Democrat? Not much. 26,000 babies a year in Ohio will be just as dead. They don't like me anymore. I used to be on their friend list. I'm not anymore. And then we ran ads. Those are all different ads that ran in all different papers. And let me show you the cartoon. Let's go to the cartoon. We ran a cartoon. We just released this one because here's what they're doing. What they're doing is they're saying, we passed another bill that will protect 173 babies. Aren't we really pro-life? Look how pro-life we are. Passing up a stadium full of babies, of 20,000 babies, the heartbeat bill would protect every year. And so we decided to expose that too. Let's play at least the first 30 seconds of this cartoon. You can get an idea what we've been doing. This one was just released.
Senate President Keith Faber has a choice to make.
You can protect a stadium full of people with the pro-life heartbeat bill.
Or
you can call yourself pro-life by only protecting the marching band. Yes, protecting people could hurt our efforts to protect people.
What?
We better not try, because we might lose.
What? Enough excuses. Call Senate President Keith Faber and tell him to pass the fully protective heartbeat bill, or quit calling himself pro-life.
You get the idea. So they don't like me. Oh, you can cut that. That's more words that people can find out what's happening. And the fact that John Kasich is actually speaking against the most protective pro-life bill to ever pass the Ohio House of Representatives. And that's not really what I'm looking for in a president. Maybe, you can give that some consideration here. So we prayed. And we stood on the state motto there at the State House. We knelt and we cried out to God, because with God all things are possible. So we stepped out to do the impossible. There we actually literally stood on the seal, stood on the Word of God, which is the state motto, and prayed for these state representatives, and we appealed to heaven again. By the way, all those baby clothes, that's the amount of babies the heartbeat bill would save every day. We delivered those to the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, and to Governor John Kasich. And so here's the thing. I was in church on Sunday, and I can give you the pep talk now only because God put in my heart more hope. And I was praying. I said, God, we didn't get the motion to rehearing the marriage case. We didn't stop this horrendous decision. We're facing the criminalization of Christianity. I've been now the 5th year trying to protect babies with beating hearts. I need a victory. And I went up for prayer, and someone says, I just feel prompted to tell you that God, the word God gave me to tell you is the word victory. Man, I hope that's from God. That's an odd coincidence if it's not. And so I just felt like, man, how long can we keep going? And I got a call the 3rd year into the battle from Jim Bob Duggar. You've heard about them. They're now being berated for the crime of his son. But Jim Bob Duggar called me up and said, Janet, I just want you to know, you guys haven't passed it there yet, but he said, I want you to know there's a whole lot of children in the state of Arkansas are going to be very grateful for the work you guys all did, because we just passed the nation's first heartbeat law. It was then passed in the state of North Dakota and is now pending in a dozen or more now states. But here's the decision that just came down from the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. Most people will look at the surface and they say, oh, the 8th Circuit struck down the North Dakota bill. We knew that was going to happen. This bill was the arrow. It's crafted to be the arrow in the heart of Roe versus Wade. Take a look at what the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals had to say. Remember our goal. We want them to move the marker from viability to heartbeat, because heartbeat's a much better marker. The Supreme Court, this is the 8th Circuit words, the Supreme Court has posited that there are logical and biological justifications for choosing viability as the critical point, but this choice, 8th Circuit Court of Appeals says, is better left to the states, which might find their interest in protecting unborn children better served by a more consistent and certain marker than viability. They picked in North Dakota the place where the point at which an unborn child possesses a detectable heartbeat to substitute its own preference to that of the legislature in this area is not the proper role of the courts. Amen to that. And we are looking to see a lot of states pass these laws, because when this gets up to the Supreme Court, I believe, even with this current Supreme Court, that we're going to see Roe versus Wade topple to the ground, or at least protect the vast majority of children who would otherwise be aborted. Can you imagine just for a moment, you think we've got it hard? Think for a moment about Winston Churchill. Nobody's bombing us right now. I just wanted to point that out. But he had bombs every single day. This is how his life was. And he was fighting, and he was standing, and he stood alone like Phyllis Schlafly. He stood in the face of evil, and he did not give up. That's where we are right now. There's a lot of people. In fact, when I wrote this book, there were a lot of people who said, Janet, I thought this was hyperbole. When I first heard it, I thought it was an exaggeration. Come on, criminalization of Christianity, United States of America, those two don't go together. Come on. And I started warning people, and not too many people listened. And we started telling people and started showing them, and now the movie's out, and not too many people show it. But you want to know something? It was the baker, and people say, well, that's not me. That's not me. I have a print shop. Well, they come into the print shop, and they want you to do their invitations. Well, that's not me, because, I'm just a public school teacher. Well, now they're telling you got to teach this to the children in your school and pervert them and corrupt them. And so what I want to tell you is that there are a lot of people who are about to get Pearl Harbored themselves. Because when Pearl Harbor happened, Winston Churchill said, he went to bed and slept the sleep of the saved and thankful. Because the sleeping giant of America was awakened, and that's what I believe is about to happen too. Let me tell you this is an interesting thing. A few months back, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and this is one of the reasons we wanted to disqualify her, here she was overseeing all these fraudulent marriages of same-sex couples, she and Elena Kagan. By the way, even talk the audacity, between the oral arguments and the time the decision came down, she did another one. This woman has no gall. I mean, think about it. Wow. And yet you think that people are going to say that's an unbiased judge? She violated federal law. This is that she shall recuse herself. She didn't do it. But here's what she said, interestingly. She's speaking at the University of Chicago this spring, and she said she believed, pro-abortion zealot, right? She believed that Roe versus Wade decision went too far, too fast. She said the court that had given the opponents access to abortion a target to aim at relentlessly. And her criticism of Roe is it seemed to have stopped the momentum that was on the side of change. What if their decision stopped the momentum of their movement and awakened a sleeping giant? What if we rise up and fight back like we did in Roe versus Wade and didn't say, well, that's the law of the land, I guess we'll have to move on, says John Kasich. And to go on to other issues, says Scott Walker. And look the other way, says Chris Christie and all these others who really? No, we're not going to move on. We're going to stand for God, and we're going to fight for his principles, and we are never going to give up. And so, how much time? Really? Wow. And so we have a freedom kit, and I'm told I got to wrap this thing up. We have a freedom kit that will help you do just that. It has an Appeal to Heaven flag. We've got them in the back. It's part of the movie that you can have a freedom party and equip your neighbors. So what do you do in the face of overwhelming darkness? The answer is shine all the brighter. So what Facebook decides that they're going to scan your information, they're going to give it to government agencies, they're going to sell it to advertisers, and then use the money they've made off of you for all the things you hate. All the agendas that undermine your values. So what do you do in the face of this overwhelming darkness? Well, we started an alternative to Facebook with the help of Steve Ensley. I don't know where you are, Steve, but I'm grateful. By the way, if you don't have somebody doing your websites that you trust, Steve Ensley in the back, oh my goodness, amazing. He's doing my email now, my websites, because he's amazing. And he built a thing called Freedom Book. And it says you can join it. We won't even tell government agencies what you had for dinner without a court order. Looking to the next thing. Jesus replied, I have a room in my house, and it's filled with Post-it notes. I may show it to you. In fact, I will show it to you. Here's part of it. And I put on all the things that God did, and I remember what he did. And I look up to God, and I say, this is the thing. There's the 2000 election. Oh, wait, there's the movie he gave us out of thin air. We didn't have a camera. I didn't know how to use it. What in the world? He did all these things. But Jesus said, and I've got another wall with Bible verses, and they look like this. And I put them on the wall. Here's one. No one who trusts in you will ever be disgraced. Boy, that's good to know. God says, I'm the God who keeps every promise to get forever. Jesus said, I am the one I have always claimed to be. I want a show of hands. This is the way I screen out the right-wing watchers. How many people believe that? How many believe that Jesus is who he says he is? All right? Now, how many people are going to change what they do and how they live as a result of that? Not as many. Oh, there we go. A few more. That's really what it's all about. And so we got to look up because there's my verse. For you have redeemed me from death. You have kept my feet from slipping. So now I can walk in your presence, O God. That's the part of seeking his face, not just his hand and his checklist of all the things you want, but to sit in the feet in the presence of God. And I have a hard time doing that. Between the Mary and Martha story, you know that? I thought that Mary was lazy and selfish, but Jesus didn't see her that way. So we've got to follow that example, sit at his feet so we can walk in his presence, in his life-giving light. And so be strong and courageous. God wouldn't have told Joshua that. He wouldn't tell us that today if we didn't need to be strong and courageous. And here's what William Booth, I'm going to end with two quotes from William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army. This is what he predicted in the last century. He says, the chief danger that confronts the coming century will be religion without the Holy Ghost, Christianity without Christ, forgiveness without repentance. Sound like the homosexual Christian movement? Forgiveness without repentance, salvation without regeneration, politics without God, heaven without hell. And when I was looking for this quote, I came across this one. I want to share it with you too because I really liked it. William Booth said this too. God loves with a great love the man whose heart is bursting with a passion for the impossible. I believe that if we step out of the boat and we do what man says can't be done, then we're going to see the God of the impossible step up to the plate. we're going to see Planned Parenthood defunded. And by the way, on the back booth, you can get one of these flyers and you can see, well, there's still a lot of companies still giving money to Planned Parenthood. I don't want to name any names: Home Depot, Starbucks, Macy's, Staples, Wells Fargo, Whole Foods. I don't want to necessarily do that, but you can get the list, and we can stop not only the funding of abortion on demand, but we can stop abortion on demand to begin with. We can stand in the face of adversity, and we can remember what Eleanor Smeal. I would not think that I would be at a church tonight quoting the words of former now president, but I'm here to tell you, here's what I want you to leave with today. I want you to leave with the knowledge of what the enemy, those who are fighting against our values, know all too well. That is, there is something very powerful working for us. And I certainly don't mean people. Thank you very much. God bless you.